He asked it casually, almost carelessly, standing in a worn-out diner with polished shoes and a life untouched by worry. When he looked at the exhausted waitress and asked how she survives on minimum wage, he expected a simple answer, maybe a shrug or a forced smile. But instead, he received something that hit harder than any business loss he had ever faced. She spoke about counting every dollar before spending it, choosing which bills could wait, skipping meals without calling it hunger, and working through pain because missing one shift could collapse her entire month. The air inside the diner felt heavier with every word, and suddenly the billionaire realized that while he measured success in profits and power, she measured survival in endurance and quiet strength. By the time she finished, the noise around them faded, and the man who owned everything stood there empty, silenced by a truth money could never buy. The billionaire had asked the question casually, almost without thinking, the way powerful people sometimes do when curiosity flickers for a second, and they assume the answer will be simple. But the moment the words left his mouth, something changed in the air between them, something heavy and unseen, like a sudden drop in pressure before a storm. He was standing in an expensive tailored suit inside a small, worn diner that smelled of coffee and fried bread, looking at a waitress whose tired eyes carried more stories than his skyscrapers ever could. When he asked her how she survived on minimum wage, he expected numbers, maybe complaints, maybe gratitude. What he did not expect was a reply that would quietly dismantle everything he believed about success, struggle, and himself. Before the story continues, take a moment to pause. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of empathy to change lives, please like this video, comment your thoughts, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel for more stories that touch the heart. The diner sat on the edge of the city, far from the glass towers and luxury hotels that defined the billionaire's daily world. It was the kind of place people only noticed when they were hungry and in a hurry, a place of chipped mugs, faded menus, and fluorescent lights that hummed softly overhead. The billionaire had not planned to be there. His driver had taken a wrong turn after a meeting collapsed, his phone battery had died, and rain had begun to fall in sheets, forcing them to stop. While the driver handled the car, the billionaire stepped inside to wait, irritated and restless, already mentally calculating the cost of wasted time. The waitress noticed him the moment he walked in. People like him always stood out, even without trying. His posture was confident, his movements precise, his shoes too clean for the sticky floor. She greeted him with the same polite smile she offered everyone, though her feet ached and her back felt like it might snap if she bent one more time. It had been a long shift, and she still had hours to go. She poured his coffee, refilled it twice before he noticed, and moved on, balancing plates and orders with the muscle memory of someone who had done this for years. Her life was not dramatic in the way movies portray hardship. It was quiet, repetitive, and exhausting. Every morning began before sunrise, with the sound of an alarm she hated and a body that never fully recovered from the day before. She lived in a small apartment with peeling paint and unreliable heat, sharing space with responsibilities that never slept. Bills lined up like silent threats: rent, utilities, medical payments from a past injury that insurance never fully covered. Groceries calculated down to the last coin. She had dreams once, but dreams cost time and money, and she had learned that survival came first. The billionaire watched her without realizing why. Perhaps it was the way she moved with calm efficiency despite the rush, or the way she smiled at an elderly customer as if he mattered deeply. He was used to people looking at him with expectation or fear, but she barely noticed him beyond her job. That unsettled him. When she came to check on him again, he asked the question, his tone neutral, almost polite. "How do you survive on minimum wage?" The question was not cruel, at least not intentionally. In his world, numbers were puzzles to be solved, problems to optimize. He genuinely could not imagine how life functioned on such little money. He expected her to laugh it off or shrug. Instead, she paused just for a second, not long enough for him to apologize, but long enough for something inside her to decide that honesty mattered more than comfort. She did not raise her voice or accuse him of anything. She did not sound bitter. She simply explained, calmly and steadily, how survival worked when there was no safety net. She spoke about choosing which bills to pay first, knowing the others would wait but not forever, about eating one real meal a day and stretching the rest with coffee and bread, about working sick because missing a shift meant losing hours she could not afford to lose, about smiling at customers even when her mind was busy calculating whether she could afford her mother's medication that month. As she continued, her words were not dramatic, but they were precise, like small stones dropped one by one into still water. She explained that surviving on minimum wage was not about living, but about enduring, about learning to exist in a constant state of alertness, where one small emergency could undo years of careful balancing. She mentioned that she did not save money because there was nothing left to save. She saved energy instead, rationing hope, learning not to expect miracles. The billionaire felt something unfamiliar tighten in his chest. He had sat in boardrooms discussing layoffs as abstract necessities. He had read reports about wages and cost of living, numbers stacked neatly in columns. But standing there, listening to her describe a life stripped down to its most basic calculations, those numbers suddenly had weight. He noticed her hands rough from work and the faint bruise on her wrist she tried to hide. He noticed the exhaustion she carried not just in her body, but in the careful way she chose her words. She went on, explaining that surviving also meant finding meaning where you could, in regular customers who remembered her name, in small acts of kindness that made the day bearable, in pride, however fragile, that she was still standing, still working, still refusing to give up. She said that minimum wage did not define her worth, but it did define the limits placed on her life. She had learned to live inside those limits, even when they felt unbearably small. By the time she finished, the diner felt quieter, though the noise had not changed. The billionaire could not speak. His mind searched for something intelligent to say, something reassuring, but every response felt hollow. He had asked a question out of curiosity, and received a truth he was not prepared to carry. For the first time in years, he felt the urge to look away, not because he was bored, but because he was ashamed. He paid his bill and left a tip so large it felt almost insulting in its excess, then paused at the door, unsure if that gesture meant anything at all. Outside, the rain had slowed, but he stood there for a moment longer than necessary. His driver called his name, but he did not answer immediately. Inside his head, the waitress's words replayed, not as accusations, but as quiet facts that refused to be ignored. In the days that followed, the billionaire tried to return to normal. Meetings resumed, emails piled up, decisions demanded his attention. Yet something had shifted. He found himself distracted, staring at spreadsheets that now seemed disconnected from the lives they affected. When executives discussed cutting costs by reducing wages or hours, he felt a tightening in his throat. He began to see faces instead of figures, hands instead of margins. He returned to the diner a week later, telling himself it was coincidence. The waitress was there again, moving with the same steady rhythm. She did not recognize him at first, and he was relieved. He watched her serve others, noting how little had changed for her, while his world had quietly cracked open. He did not ask more questions this time. He simply observed, listening without interrupting, learning without demanding explanations. Over time, the billionaire began to make changes, small at first, then bolder. He reviewed wage structures in his companies not as charity but as correction. He pushed for benefits that acknowledged real human needs. He funded programs he had once dismissed as impractical. None of it erased the past, and none of it made him a hero, but it aligned his actions a little closer to the reality he could no longer ignore. The waitress never knew the full extent of the impact she had made. Her life did not transform overnight. She still worked long hours and worried about bills, but one day her paycheck increased slightly, then again. A new policy provided health coverage she had never had before. Opportunities appeared that had once been unimaginable. She did not know why the system shifted, only that it did, and that for the first time in years she could breathe without counting every breath. Near the end of the story, if this journey has touched your heart, if it made you pause and reflect on lives different from your own, please take a moment to like this video, share it with others, and subscribe to the channel. Your engagement helps these stories reach more people who need them. As the billionaire and the waitress continued their separate lives, connected only by a brief conversation in a forgotten diner, the lesson remained clear. Survival should not require silence. Dignity should not be a luxury. And sometimes, the most powerful changes begin not with speeches or headlines, but with one honest answer to a question someone was brave enough to ask. Before this story ends, please comment below and share what this story made you feel or think about. Your words matter, and they help keep these conversations alive. In the end, the billionaire never forgot the moment his question met a truth stronger than his wealth. And the waitress, still standing, still striving, became the quiet reminder that humanity is not measured by income, but by empathy and by the willingness to truly see one another.